The Division 2. More of the same, but in a good way. Let's get right into it. This will contain mild spoilers for the story and some factions. Be prepared for that. Where do I start, though? Let's see. The Division 2. As everyone knows what the Division is, I'm not going to go into any explanation as to what it is. All I'll say is it's a looter-shooter as part of the course these days. That being said, it's a looter-shooter done right. Besides Destiny, there really hasn't been a looter-shooter done right. Don't get me wrong, I've heard all the complaints about Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, but they've eventually somewhat fixed their problems. But we're not really here to talk about Destiny 1 or 2, are we? We're here to talk about the Division 2. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the major issue of Division 1, which was how bullet spongy the enemies felt. In Division 2, they've more or less fixed it. I haven't really felt that any enemies are bullet spongy, except for the very few that are like elite that come out, they're yellow bar health, they're wearing extremely heavy armor, and you just have to sit there and unload on them until you break a piece of their armor to finally kill them. Once you break a piece of their armor, they go down fairly quickly, so I really don't know. These enemies kind of get really annoying when you have to go against them. They show up, they'll sit there, and they'll unload a heavy-ass machine gun at you 90% of the time. I ran into one that came at me with a sledgehammer. That was annoying. And then I ran into one that was using a sniper rifle. But most of the time, these heavy enemies with this heavy armor are running machine guns, and they do, quite frankly, get bullet spongy and annoying because that's their sole purpose, to be bullet sponges. But all in all, the rest of the enemies kind of go down fairly quickly, no matter what level you are. Headshots usually generally just kill outright. I really haven't shot someone in the head and was like, oh, they survived that. How did they do that? No, most of the time, when I shoot them in the head, they die, thankfully. But it is fairly difficult to shoot someone in the head. I've gotten upper shoulder shots when I thought I hit them in the head. You have to be really accurate. That head hitbox is very small, but when you shoot them in the head, they die most of the time. The few exceptions are those heavy guys wearing helmets and soldiers wearing helmets. If they're wearing a helmet, they're probably not going to go down with your first headshot. But from my experiences, except for the heavies with that heavy-ass armor, 1 or 2 shots to the people's heads and they die. The next point of contention is the loot. In a few of the looter shooters these days, loots don't feel worth it. Anthem, I'm literally looking at you, as Destiny kind of gives decent loot most of the time. Though unlike Destiny, you're not going to get any super unique looking guns and weapons, as the fact that this is a semi-realistic world, you're only going to have your M4s, your carbines, your submachine guns, your Uzis, your Thompsons, your shooter. You get the point. But that's not a bad thing, as you're getting showered with loot a lot. I'm constantly getting guns, constantly. And the gear, bulletproof vests, backpacks, gloves, so on and so forth. I'm constantly getting that stuff all the time. Whether it's better or not, I'm still having a nice shower of loot being thrown at my face. So, I'm not really in wanting. Though where I am left wanting is in the vanity items. Hats, glasses, shirts, pants, etc. I'm barely getting those. I've only got 3 outside of what I started with and the DLC that I had, which is the Hazmat Suit 2.0. Outside of that, I don't have any vanity items, and it's starting to annoy me. In Division 1, I could go into random buildings and walk around and find stuff. But in Division 2, I really haven't been able to find anything at all. Now, granted, this could just be a personal experience, and other people might be finding vanity items all over the place. But it scares me that I haven't found any, simply because there is now a vanity item store, bigger than Division 1. It has more stuff in it, more unique stuff in it, and it's starting to kind of worry me a little bit. Because in Division 1, I could walk around and find things that are cool and nice looking, and the vanity items that were in the store was a nice little tack on that I was like considering buying a couple things. But in Division 2, I'm not getting really any vanity items, and now the store is looking like the only place to get anything that looks somewhat cool. Now let's continue. Outside of the loot, let's go with the world. How is the world of Division 2? Well, unfortunately, it feels a lot emptier than Division 1, surprisingly. Why? There isn't any civilians just walking around. All I've ever run into is patrols from your base places that you're able to capture, more on that in a minute, and enemies that you walk into, and they're doing random things randomly. Honestly, it's very random with what you can run into occasionally. And those random things are public executions, which you can interrupt. You run into them, you shoot at the people, and you try to save the person or persons that were being executed. There's hostage situations where you run in and start shooting everyone until you get a key to unlock the door to let the hostage out. Then there's radio signals where you run in there and capture a radio signal and start broadcasting your stuff. Now, for whatever reason, in my playtime, within 10 or so minutes, that radio signal's being controlled by the enemy again. Why can't we hold this? It's in the middle of our territory. What's going on? Excuse me. Anyway, outside of those random events, there's really not much going on in this world. It's nice and beautiful. It's breathtaking in some situations. When you walk through certain areas, you just, oh my God, the experience is amazing. But it's empty. There's very few buildings that you can actually go inside. Most of them are mission related or some sort of capture point related. There's no civilians running around. There's animals. There's wildlife. There's a couple dogs, cats, squirrels. I think I've seen a squirrel or two. Rats, deer. You know, the stereotypical wildlife/city pests. But again, no civilians. It really takes the life out of the area. Some of the breathtaking views would make it even more tragic of the areas if you could see civilians just walking around crying or talking to each other like you could in Division 1. That was a really immersive part that's just missing. Now, granted, it was a little unrealistic to have enemies just walking around right next to civilians, not doing anything to them, but you could change that. Have the enemies occasionally chase them, or, depending on the faction, of course, trying to kill them or trying to get money from them, etc., etc. Have that happen more often. You see that occasionally as some of the side things with the enemy faction and the patrolling faction of the friendlies. You just no civilians. That's one major flaw for me. No civilians. It's really unimmersive when it comes to that. All in all, this world feels really beautiful and really nice, but the fact that there's little to no civilians at all make it really difficult to get immersed. And the only civilians you see are at the settlements, which is a thing. The settlements are essentially those outposts that were in the first game. While the outposts still exist here, they're abandoned and there's nothing in them now, most of them. All you have to do is go to these settlements to do everything outside of your base camp, which you have to go to level up pretty much, to put any of your perks in or anything like that. You have to go back to the White House. The settlements are more micromanaging, just like the White House. You have to do things, you have to donate, and so on and so forth, for them to level the settlements up to then gain perks. Now, I've only unlocked one settlement, but there's several settlements on my map that are still labeled as settlements, and one of them I went to is completely dead, gone, everyone was killed. Now, I'm not 100% sure that you can even rebuild this, so it's some sort of plot point where you go there expecting to talk to someone at the settlement, and everyone's dead. But the problem is, I had no investment in this place. Not going there and finding them first. I was never allowed there. I didn't even know they existed. Then I get the whole mission thing to go there. I go there, they're dead. I had no time invested in this place at all, so that just makes it an abandoned place just like everywhere else I go, except for just a few minutes beforehand, just before I got there, there was a whole bunch of alive people that got killed. I'm supposed to care about them. My character is supposed to care about them. I don't. He does, supposedly. Even though, again, he's never spent any time there, he didn't even know that place existed. Yet he cares so much, he's going to go hunt down the people that did it and kill them. Now, granted, I would have hunted those people down and killed them anyway, because they're bad guys. But the problem is, he's supposed to care about this settlement, which he's never been to, ever. Anyway, that's a little rant for a different time. Let's get back onto the review. Now, outside of settlements, which there's only one, I guess, but there's a whole bunch on my map, but I don't know if the rest of them are plot points or not. There is control points. Control points are essentially outposts that you can capture for the friendly faction to come take over and have a presence in the area. Generally, I haven't seen much change except for more patrols of the friendly faction. That's about it, which I guess is what's supposed to happen. But it still doesn't help the world feel any more alive or dynamic in any way. It just replaces enemy patrols with friendly patrols, but there's still enemy patrols in the area as well, so occasionally there'll be things getting shot at each other. That doesn't really feel like life to me. That just feels like people shooting at each other like a war shooter. But I'm getting off track again. Let's continue about the factions. How are the factions? Well, you've got the friendly faction, which I really hesitate to call them the JTF from number 1, even though they're wearing the shirts, some of them. I consider them to be more of a civilian faction just wearing the JTF clothing, because other than that, they really don't look like any military personnel. They look like civilians walking around with green shirts on that say JTF on the back. Then you've got the Hyenas, a crazy punk faction that is your stereotypical crazy, psychopathic, post-apocalyptic gang. Then you've got the True Sons, which is basically a paramilitary group run by ex-JTF officers, which, coincidentally, they look way more militaristic than the actual JTF currently. The ones that I said I hesitate to say are JTF because they walk around looking like civilians. Next come the Outcasts, which are basically just civilians and prisoners from jails and stuff who have banded together to create a group who go around just killing everyone. That's their entire goal, is to kill everything. Lastly, you've got the Black Tusks. They are some sort of super high-tech private military force that are really dangerous. They're highly militarized. They have extremely good technology, and no one knows what they're here for. So those right there are the factions. You'd think, with those varying descriptions, that they would vary in tactics and the way they approach situations. They don't. They all act the same. They all have one person who's going to run towards you, either try to shoot you with a shotgun, or melee you, or blow themselves up. They all have that sniper who's going to sit in the back and shoot at you. They all have their normal grunts that just sit there and spam machine guns. They all have that one dude who's going to sit there and fire so many grenades at you, it's going to get annoying. And they all have these people that have giant backpacks on their back that either heal or put down technological things that will cause you trouble. Now, it could be the same person. I've never really paid attention, and because I was so busy shooting them in the face, because they cause so much trouble. They either run to a dead person that you've just killed and completely revive them, or they put down a machine gun or bomb car that will cause problems. Shoot at you or blow you up, one of the two. And then they all have the one big dude who comes out wearing extremely heavy armor that you just have to sit there and shoot at them until you break their armor, wasting so much of your ammo until you kill them in some kind of bizarre light show because you shot their armor off, which caused a bunch of sparks to happen. And that is the only enemy variant types that you will run into throughout every faction. Nothing changes. It's just the same over and over and over again. Now, granted, I oversimplified that list, and there is a large list of varying enemies, they're all different. Like clench fist means something, the military badge means something. There's all kinds of different little badges on their name, which means they're a different enemy type. But I oversimplified it because they all act relatively the same way except for very few differences, which is what I said, the rusher, the stay back, and so on and so forth. Now again, as I stated earlier in the review, this is a semi-realistic world, so there's not going to be weird flying enemies. But speaking of that, I feel like there should be some more variation between factions outside of just voice dialogue and how they look. Like the hyenas could be more sporadic in their movements and maybe rarely use cover because they're always running around, jumping around, and trying to shoot you. And the true sons could just, since they are ex-JTF soldiers and stuff, could be a little bit more militaristic with how they do things and, a little bit more rigid, using cover a lot and that kind of stuff. And since they are normal soldiers, they act more like normal soldiers with their machine guns and they're sitting in the back and they're shooting and all that stuff. Or like the Black Tusks, which are that super secret private military force that have high tech gear. Maybe they like to sit in the back with more silenced weapons and snipers and stuff instead of rushing like everyone else does. Now, I'll grant, I haven't really experienced the Outcasts or the Black Tusks all that much because I haven't really run into them all that often, but I have enough to say that they act basically like every other enemy that I've run into. But that's enough about factions. Let's get on to the story real quick. I'm only going to keep this part short because so far I'm still working on the story, obviously. The story so far is rather bland. Your character is in a mad rush because he starts out in some kind of town that gets attacked, and now he's in some mad rush to get everything back online to help it. At least that's what the first bit of the story makes you feel like that's what he's supposed to do. But then as soon as he gets to DC, he just kind of sits there, does pretty much nothing. And by pretty much nothing, I mean now he's just helping DC out instead of really not giving a shit about the other town that, you started. The support characters are rather bland, and you are supposed to care about them or something like that in some situations, but you're thrown right in the middle of this situation with no context, no build-up. You're just like, go here, save these people. I don't know who they are. You really care about them. Are you sure I care about them? Because I don't know who they are. I mean, granted, you're a division agent and your job is to care. But the thing is, how? How can you as a person care when you don't know who anything is or anyone is and what's going on in 90% of the situations? Like, for example, I didn't even realize I was fighting a completely different faction from the starting faction you fight because they don't tell you. It's just all of a sudden I realized, oh, these are labeled as the True Sons. That's a little weird. I thought I was fighting the Hyenas, which I really didn't get an intro to either. I just knew they were bad. Then I was doing another mission and I ran into the Outcasts. I didn't even know who they were. I, honest to God, thought I was fighting the Hyenas until one of the Outcasts set themselves on fire and came running at me. Still, not as unique as I would want them to be, but at least there was a variation difference right there. They set themselves on fire before they ran at me. Granted, after that happened, I paid more attention to what they were wearing, and they weren't wearing the stereotypical hyena punk look. There's just no build-up, no information dump. It's just go here, shoot this. And a good portion of the time, it's going to be a horde mode that you have to survive. I've run into that almost 90% of the time. Get there and I do the mission, and all of a sudden the mission tells me, oh, sit here and survive the wave. Shit, another horde mode. There's a horde mode if you go and try to take over the outpost. There's a horde mode for some of those world events. For example, the execution. You kill the people trying to execute them. Now you have to face a wave of enemies that come in to try to kill you for doing that. Taking over one of the radio beacons. Oh, there's a horde mode to defend the radio beacon. It kind of gets a little repetitive. I'm also somewhat getting ahead of myself. I'm still not done complaining about the support characters. Your division agent person that you help occasionally, a female, she is rather she's just rather bland. I keep using the word bland, but that's just what it is. It's a bland soup. This game is a bland soup. The division agent's name being Elena Kelso, by the way. She comes off as a bully trying to do things her way. Like, for example, when you first meet her, she's supposed to be helping you save this girl, or you're supposed to be helping her save this girl, and you arrive at the building, and she blows the absolute living shit out of the building this girl is being stored in. Then, halfway through that mission, she blows the building up again. What happens if she blew that building up and it took the entire top floor where the girl was stored with her? Some restraint would be nice. And then later on, you don't run into her really ever again after that, except for a couple cutscenes here and there. And then I go to this one mission, and she's there, and she's, like we've talked to each other a lot after that. I don't know. And then she's just like, oh, Agent, you're here. I know you'll help. And some other dialogue, and then at the very end of it, she goes, go and kill them all. Like, they zoom in on her face like it's supposed to be a super serious situation. It's kind of like you're sitting there and you stare at her for a second and you're like, you're the person who blew the ever-living shit out of a building while there was a girl on top of it. Do you really care about what's going on in this situation for me to go and kill all those people for you? Really? Do you care? I'm not 100% sure you do. And side note, she's standing there holding this child the entire time, hugging her. Like, excuse me? You've never once came off as a caring person through that entire situation that I've known you. As soon as we've rescued that girl from the building you blew the shit out of, you were bullying her mother, trying to make her do things for you. Excuse me? Then you've got Manning, the dude who sits back at the White House and you generally talk to him through the radio. He comes off as very weird. He's just a weird guy. He calls you the sheriff, and he does some weird shit. He's not any interesting either. He's got an odd personality, and they try to shove some backstory of his down your throat as a path that you're supposed to take to a mission leads you directly to a echo that you open up, and it's him and a friend of his or an uncle or something like that, and there you go. And, of course, then there's some, things you can pick up throughout the White House that sit there and say how terrible of a person he is. Like, no one wants him as the leader. And supposedly he was a senator, I think. I swear I picked up a little collectible thing while listening to it. It was Senator Manning. And I'm pretty sure that's the thing that I listened to. So he's a senator of some sort. I'm not 100% sure. I'd go and listen to that again, but I swear that's something I've seen. And that doesn't make sense at all. Like, you know nothing about these people. The girl that we previously rescued, her mother, Odessa, lives in the only settlement that I think exists. I'm not 100% sure, like I stated earlier. She's the only one that you really kind of get. Because how they introduce her to you, you know nothing about her. She knows nothing about you. She's like, hi, if you're looking for the other agent, she's not here. Go help her get my daughter back, and I'll forever be in your debt. You go out and help Agent Kelso get the daughter back. You come back. You talk to her once or twice after that. One cutscene. Then a few times later, you help the settlement out, and then you go and talk to her again, and she's like, hey, sweetie. Now, combine that with the face animation, and it came off rather flirty. That definitely was not their intention, so I'm not going to really comment on that. But that, right there, was the best relationship build-up they have in this game. You meet her, you know nothing about her, you help her settlement, and the relationship builds from there, some friendship and some trusts. You get to know her. But again, they really do this weird thing where all throughout DC, when you're walking around, you can find an echo that has something to do with her. And she's sitting there, and she's an agent, and she's done some things, and it's weird. It's like, I don't care. Like, I know how she is now. I don't particularly care too much about her past, because no one's really bringing it up. Well, let's go enough about those side characters. Let's talk about the enemy side characters, the bosses or the generals or the other things of the enemy factions. Now, they're always built up. Like, if you find things throughout the world that builds these people up, but you run into them on random missions, completely random missions. Like, I ran into one of the generals of the True Sons, and they built her up to be some badass, some hard-to-kill motherfucker. But then you kill her like it's nothing, and her attacks weren't even all that unique. It was just another standard enemy with a yellow name. I didn't even realize it was her until I seen the name, and I was like, holy shit, this is that badass general. Well, she's dead now. This actually happens quite a lot. There's a lot of people who are built up to be some kind of badass, and you kill them like it's nothing. It's really disappointing. But that's enough about the story. Let's go on to the multiplayer and how that works. The PvP. They have actually a PvP mode now. You can go and do a team deathmatch and kill people and earn points. I haven't really messed around with this mode because it really doesn't suit my fancy to play at the moment, because everyone I run into is overly powered with their guns. Granted, there's level scaling and weapon scaling, so everyone's the same level and the weapons are the same, roughly, but still some weapons are overpowered as all hell, and I don't have access to those at the moment. But what about the legendary Dark Zones? Well, I avoid those at all costs too, although that's where all the best gear is, so I still go there. Almost everyone you run into is going to be some kind of dick. There's never really that whole friendly, let's work together thing. No, it's just, let's shoot everyone and take everything. I've not run into anyone being nice. Never. I've always gotten my shit taken from me, and I've always gotten my gear taken from me. It's just how that place works. It's a lot smaller than the Dark Zones from number 1, which is kind of disappointing. The reason why I'd rather have them rather large, like in the Division 1, is it makes it to where the players are spread out, so you're less likely to run into them. So that way, you're not going to always get your shit taken from you. Almost every time I've gone into the Dark Zone, I've lost everything. Every time. Because I get to the chopper, I call the chopper in, it comes in, and I get shot immediately as soon as I walk up to the chopper. It's just, that's how it's been working. And I'm in the Dark Zone that is within my level. I am well above the level requirements to be in this Dark Zone, and there is level scaling, so we're all roughly the same anyway. So I should have a fair advantage, but I just get killed quite often. It's never friendly there. But all in all, I actually kind of do like how small it is, even though I just said that I wish it was bigger, because there is that element of players. You get to see players, although you tend to try to avoid them at all costs unless you decide to go rogue and shoot them in the face. But most of them are rogue anyway, so you can still shoot them in the face. So the Dark Zones are one big clusterfuck to try to avoid but go into on your own risk because you want the good gear. To be fair, I still have a lot of fun even though I lose everything. And that statement brings me quite nicely to wrapping this entire thing up. I've been overly negative this entire review, haven't I? But the thing is, it's still fun. I'm still having fun, and that's the most important thing about a game, a looter shooter. The story can be bland, everything can be kind of bland, but the thing is, it's still there. It's still entertaining in some points. It still makes you kind of balls out laugh. You can still have fun, and that's the whole entire point of a game, is to have fun, and I'm having fun. Playing with my friends, I'm going around and exploring the world. Even though it's empty, I'm still exploring the world and having fun. It's kind of like Dark Souls or Bloodborne in a way, of the world being empty, but exploring it is still fun. Surprisingly, it is very similar to Bloodborne and Dark Souls in the way it tells certain stories in some areas. When you're walking around, you can kind of see what happened, and you can kind of picture it with the dead bodies that are lying around. Surprisingly, there's a lot of fresh dead bodies everywhere, even though this place hasn't been touched in a while. But still, it still tells a nice story, and it's just odd that there's no civilians running around that can even fill it out more. Yes, I'm still bringing that complaint in when I'm wrapping things up. All in all, even with the bland story, the bland characters, and the samey environment, I can recommend this game for you to buy. So with my final score system, I'm going to have to sit there and say you can buy it at full price. but only if you're willing to overlook a lot of the things that kind of happen sometimes. Well, that's all for me, everyone. I have an agent asking for assistance, so I've got to go help them. Maybe I'll see you in D.C. Broken Exodus, signing out.